Well, good evening, good morning. We're John and Donna Bigler, your international coordinators, and this will be our first quarterly update.
We're excited to be here with you and bring this update to you. We hope that your year is going well and that you see a big, bright future ahead for us. This is our family. We're going to start off with that. We've got 3 children that are all adults now, and our dog Chloe, who's our working dog. She goes to work with John every day in the office and absolutely loves it. Our family's also growing. We've got 2 granddaughters up in the state of Washington, and our youngest daughter is in the state of Ohio, and we'll be getting married in October. So we're really all across the United States represented with our family.
We should probably mention that we did our weekend in 2008, and we'll be married 30 years this June.
Yes.
So, Retrouvaille, past, present, and future. Learning from the past helps to ensure that mistakes are not repeated and paves the way for a better future.
We have to look at our past to see where we're headed and where we need to make improvements and adjust. And so that's kind of where we're starting off here. So if you'll bear with us for a few minutes, we'll get to the good stuff, but we wanted to just tell you where we see our past is and where we see we're going. In 2013, you can see that we served just about 6,000 couples in Retrouvaille, which is amazing. And this graph shows you that from 2013 all the way down to 2023. And in 2023, we saw about 1,800 couples.
So, in terms of looking at the graph and what's happening, you can kind of see a major drop off between 2019 and 2020. And obviously, that was the COVID lockdowns that have had probably the most negative impact on weekend attendance in the last 10 years. And there's other factors that we don't really have control over. So decreased church attendance worldwide definitely is a downward pressure in terms of couples that are married that want to come on a Retrouvaille weekend and try to save their marriage.
Yeah, and then just even less couples choosing marriage. And it took a couple years for some areas to recover from COVID. So they're just now starting, even in 2024, but mostly in 2023, some areas were just able to start having weekends again. So there's been a lot going on the last few years.
One of the things that we've considered is we're looking backwards and we're seeing that, essentially we're marketing our ministry using kind of 1980s approaches. So one of the things we need to do is figure out how we can bring ourselves back up to 2024 in terms of our marketing techniques.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time in the past on other priorities than Friday night couples. I think the intentions were probably good with the idea that, let's say, restructuring, that would somehow increase our Friday night couple attendance. Unfortunately, none of those prerogatives really have become a reality. And you can kind of see that, despite discussing all of those kind of concepts, that it really didn't have an impact in terms of increased attendance on our weekends. And then we've spent a significant amount of money over the past, 10 years on other priorities, but none of that money really helped us to increase our Friday night couples.
Next slide. And so here's our spending that we're talking about. You can see our income and expenses. A lot of years we were actually operating at a loss, and we're kind of looking at now we've got to figure out how to do this and how to market Retrouvaille in a way that is practical and fits our budget, and we can get it out there so everyone knows about it.
Yeah, and you can kind of see there in 2017 where essentially what happened there, like, well, gosh, how come we made all that money in that year? What happened was we had a lot of what we call restricted funds. So those are funds that we aren't essentially allowed to spend, but in that year they became available for spending, and so we spent about $270,000 that year. What do we spend it on? Primarily bringing a lot of people to the ICM, and so those kinds of things. Again, it kind of goes back to travel and meetings comprise the majority of our spending, and overall we have not spent a lot of money on our website, paid staff. We don't have any right now. And marketing and publicity. So that's kind of what our priorities have been in the past.
Yeah. So here we are in the present. Where are we going and what are we doing? So currently, as we said earlier, we served 1,800 couples in 2023. There's now 130 active communities worldwide. Espanol and Ro, or rest of the world, are expanding quicker than everyone else. It's like their growth is amazing. We are also facing increased competition in the struggling marriage arena, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the reasons are and everything else. Our customer service and business practices really do not keep up with what the other organizations that are represented and helping marriages in trouble. It's just a different space.
Yeah, what we mean by that really is that since we're all comprised of volunteers, we really can't compete with customer service where we have live people answering the phone, where some of these other ministries are much more well-funded. And so they have, paid staff, they have, $100,000 marketing budgets. And so that's kind of what we'll talk about on this next slide here. So what you'll notice is that over on the left-hand side, we have sort of the lackluster and a little bit frustrated, no major problems. And then as you go over to the right, you end up in the crisis, divorce space. And in the past, Retrouvaille was really kind of the only circle over here. But you'll notice now that there's a bunch of other circles here. Some even aren't listed here. So we have a lot of competition in the crisis, marriage, divorce space. Why? Because this money talks. People are willing to pay money to save their marriage, believe it or not, even in the secular arena. And so some of these ministries have really capitalized on that.
Yeah, and I just did a quick Google search a little bit ago on these ministries. We're talking about most of these other ministries are multi-million-dollar companies that spend, John said $100,000 on their marketing budget. I'm saying they're spending millions of dollars on their marketing budget. So
$100,000 a month, maybe?
Yeah, maybe $100,000 a month. So Retrouvaille International has a budget maybe of $100,000 a year. That's our total budget for everything. So we obviously cannot compete with that. So we have to find ways around that to really give our ministry a foothold, because we believe that Retrouvaille is the most powerful ministry out there. None of these other organizations have follow-up sessions or weekends. You pretty much come in on Friday in a mess, and they hope that you leave Sunday happy, and that's kind of the end of it. I'm sure there's some support material they send you home with, books to read, such, but they don't have the personal program that we do.
Yeah, and really, in today's world, there's very few ministries that are sort of down here in the, lackluster. I'm a little bit frustrated. Even Marriage Encounter now has started to try to move more over to the right into the, struggling marriage space. So the only thing left in the lackluster, I'm a little frustrated as well. Maybe some Cabernet or Busch Light will, make it better for me.
Yeah, let's go out and have a date night. And maybe
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so when we first started thinking about all this, we decided to find out how many of our communities in the United States are answering the phone live so that we know where we can drive business and how it's going to work. At this point, 30% of our communities in the U.S., or 22 communities, are answering the phone live every time it rings. There's another 17% that are answering the phone and returning calls within 24 hours. The majority of the communities in the U.S. are not answering the phones live. And actually, some of these took more than 24 hours to return the call. Some of them never returned the phone call where we left a message. And that was 53% of our communities in the U.S. That fell into that range.
Yeah, really, once you go past 24 hours, it really doesn't make any difference. And whether you call back or not, because one of the things, or one of the analogies that Donna and I have talked about is, hey, if your toilet's backed up, you got water, going out into your house, you're looking for a plumber, you're going to call the first plumber, and you know what, you get an answering machine. I don't know about you, I'm going to the next guy who doesn't have an answering machine, and who can come out here in the next 30 minutes. That's what I'm looking for. So, and truthfully, even looking at that 53%, the red, the overwhelming majority of those never called back. I mean, yes, we got a call back from, some like a week later, but ultimately the majority in that category never called back at all.
And we have kept this survey, which communities are involved, completely anonymous. We don't want to put that information out. This was just merely our fact-finding mission to find out where we were at and see where we could help.
Yeah, we need to know if we increase our marketing efforts, do we really have the capacity to handle those leads that are coming in? Because if we don't have the capacity, then what's going to happen, just like in the plumber analogy, they call us, they don't get an answer. Guess what? They go back to, these other circles that have live people answering the phone. So really, if we spent money on marketing, ultimately we're just kind of driving struggling couples to these other ministries. So what we're talking about in terms of how do we address this? So looking at the current model, we have our Retrouvaille website, and we have an 800 number there. People can call the 800 number. Again, we're using really the same concept that we started with in the late 70s. So the assumption is, well, gee, if your area code, you dial from an area code, that's where you live. Back in the 1970s, that was true. You couldn't take your area code with you. So basically what happens is you dial our 800 number, and then based on your area code, your phone call will be routed to the community based on your area code. Well, that's not really true anymore because people generally take their phone numbers with them. And so what happens is, if you're living in New York, but you had previously lived in California, so, you dial into the 800 number, you're looking for a Retrouvaille weekend in New York. Well, guess what? You end up talking to somebody over in California where you used to live, which isn't real productive. But assuming you manage to somehow negotiate all that labyrinth, then what happens is only 30% of the people are answering the phone. So you probably end up in a voicemail. And then if that just sits there for a couple of days, you'll see kind of down below here, we talk about, well, if you just sit there, you're already struggling, you're very close to getting a divorce. Well, maybe I'll just start calling divorce attorneys instead. Or, you know what? I'm going to go back to those other circles. Maybe they'll answer the phone. I'll talk to them. And then ultimately, you get a call back from community, intermediary, which may or may not be relevant really to what you're looking for.
Yeah. And the competitors that we called directly just to find out what was going on, every one of them answered the phone up within 3 rings. They all had a live person on the line. So that was one of the things that we also discovered.
So what we're talking about is coming up with a new model where people come to the website, they dial the 800 number. We're not able to address the fact that people's area code will go to a different place. But assuming that happens, let's say your community isn't able to answer the phone live for whatever reason. So what we want to do is create a bank of volunteers that will be able to answer your phone for you, assuming you invite us in and ask for our help. And so ideally after 3 rings, we will pick up the phone if your community is not able to, and then we'll route the call wherever it needs to go, getting us closer to the kind of customer service that we want to be able to compete with our competitors there.
Yeah, and this is one of those things. This is another thing that we did a pilot program on and started a few communities answering the phone live to see what would happen. And with them answering the phone lines, they increased their weekend attendance by about 25%. And that just continued from one weekend to the next. So as they've been answering the phones now for 6 months, they are getting more and more couples on their weekends because they are answering the phones. One of the concerns is, we don't have anyone to be on the phone 24/7. The people we've talked to that are answering phone live say they generally don't get phone calls in the middle of the night, maybe one a month. Most of the phone calls come in during the day. Most of them say they get 8 to 10 calls a week, nothing unmanageable. It is helping, but, we are trying to get some volunteers, and those volunteers can be anyone. Someone who's, an empty nester, has their kids are all gone, that someone's home all day. Surviving spouses, they want to find another way to be involved with Retrouvaille. It's a good fit for them too, if they want to just answer questions and help direct people on the website. There's other, anyone who can do it, who has just a little bit of time to pick up the phone when it rings.
This is really just low hanging fruit here because, this is not us having to go out and recruit, other couples to come in or expanding our reach. These are just dealing with the people that are already calling our number, but just handling them in a responsible manner, essentially. Mm-hmm. So what's new for 2024? The best way to predict the future is to create it.
So we kind of look at it. We do post 3 and 4, where in post 4 we do the values versus ideals exercise. And just as a reminder, value is something that we recognize as good and worthwhile and that we choose to have in our life now by sacrificing other things. And an ideal is something that we recognize as good and worthwhile that I want in my life sometime in the future. And we kind of look at these definitions and say, where are we as a ministry and what are our values and ideals? Is Friday night couples our value, or is it our ideal? And we really want to make the Friday night couples a value in everything we do.
We really found this to be a valuable exercise for, our marriage and for our family in terms of, what are we really spending our time and energy and money doing? And this can also be applied to a ministry. And that's why we brought this up. And you probably recognize the page out of the post workbook.
Yeah.
So here's our goals for 2024. We, in January as a board, we set our goals, and we're kind of like to go through those with you. And ultimately, at the end of the year, we'll determine, I guess, and you'll tell us whether these goals were values or whether they're ideals.
Yeah. And, Retrouvaille started off as a grassroots organization and movement. We recognize that. We kind of want to keep that going because we really need the communities and the people on the ground to run it. We don't have the finances and we don't have millions of dollars to spend on marketing. And we just really can't do it all on our own. With about 20 people on the international board, we can't do everything for the entire world that really needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, our budget right now typically is about $115,000 in income.
Yeah, for the entire to run international, do all marketing, all the website, the 800 number, anything else that comes up, it's all has to be covered in that money.
So the first goal that as a board we decided was the most important. What we did was we threw out some different ideas and different goals, and then we all voted which ones were the most important. And pretty much far and away everybody on the board agreed that directly addressing the issue of declining Friday night couples was the number one priority of the ministry. And you probably heard this before because we've always talked about in the ministry, well, we need to, we're all here for the Friday night couple, but saying it is one thing, that's an ideal. A value is actually putting our time, resources, and money into achieving that. And so some of our objectives we listed over here on the right.
Yeah. So develop a team to answer the phones, which we already talked about, and for community, and those are for communities who aren't able to do it themselves. We want to have a team out there that can do it. We'll just route your phone calls to them, and they'll answer answer the phone calls for you and give people the information, help them register, help them find out what the information they need, and start moving your community forward. And another thing we're looking at is the public-facing website redesign. I know it seems like we just did this a few years ago, but when you look at, again, our competitors' websites, they're much easier to navigate than what ours are. And it just we think that would make a big difference and help.
We spent money redoing the back end of the website. The front end we've had for probably at least the last 10 years. And so, to me, as somebody who uses it fairly frequently, it seems very intuitive, very user-friendly. But when Donna and I were the deputy coordinators for the last 2 years, we answered all the phone calls that come in. Actually, all the emails that come into the website. And these are people that typically can't find what they're looking for. And so that's typically about 70 to 120 emails a month that we needed to respond to. And really a lot of them are just, we're kind of air traffic controllers, just trying to get people where they need to go. They're not able to figure out where they need to go based on the website design. So one of the things that we want to do in doing the redesign is try to make it more intuitive, more user-friendly to those people that haven't used it, that are struggling, that are frustrated, they're emotional. So it's easy for, Don and I to, and maybe you to navigate the front end of the website because you're very familiar with it. But objectively, a couple who is really struggling, it seems like if we're getting anywhere from 70 to 120 emails a month, they're having a tough time with it.
Yeah. And then part of the phone answering help, but there's also, we're looking at a community help team where if your community is having a hard time with registrations, with whatever, even just getting a hold of your local churches and parishes. And there's communities that have been doing a great job at that. And we're trying to get a team together that if your community is struggling with that, they can step in and kind of show you how to do it and help you get it and find the resources you need in order to start reaching out to some of these other people. We're also looking at trying to improve our SEO or search engine optimization. And, we've got some software that we're working with trying to get basically so that Retrouvaille appears higher up on the list of names when you search for marriage help.
So, our next goal, which is improving written and verbal communication from the International Board to the communities, from community to community, and communities to regions. So obviously, as an International Board, we have control over communicating with you, the communities, the council. That's something we want to work on. And then as we go from community to community or community and regions, our role really becomes more and more attenuated, and we just need to provide tools for you to be able to use. So one of the things that we've talked about, so measurable objective, removing barriers to communication by the use of technology. And, in the first board meeting, we brought forward the idea of let's decommission the existing forum and let's move it to Viva Engage. And Viva Metrics, which essentially kind of tracks who uses it, what we're doing, and that's really sort of for us more analyzing things statistically. But for you, using Viva Engage is kind of like, you can think about it as something much more user friendly, much more modern, something that people are more familiar with the way you interact with it. It's more like Facebook, where it has a feed. And so the information that you've decided that you want to engage with is delivered to you. You don't have to go out and look for it, although it does have very powerful search features.
Yeah. And we are looking for feedback from the International Council on all the things we do and, and how we're doing on the communication.
So one of the gauges that we look at in terms of a measurable objective is how many couples in the ministry have a Help Our Marriage email address. That becomes more and more important as we transition to Viva Engage, because in order to use Viva Engage, you have to have a Help Our Marriage email address. And you probably noticed on the forum that we have a guide that you can go through to get yourself a personal Help Our Marriage email address, whether you already have one as a community coordinator or a registration couple in your community, or maybe you've never applied for one. You don't have to have a role in the community to have a Help Our Marriage email address. And we've posted a guide on the forum, and you'll be receiving an email very soon directly to your email. Every person in the ministry will receive this, and it'll have a guide there, how to get a Help Our Marriage email address, how to use Viva Engage with video links and that sort of thing. So look for that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we've also started using the Zoom translation services on our Zoom channel that we have with the ministry, and it's really become very helpful in a lot of different areas. I know we've used it for our board of directors meetings, and we typically have someone on. It's a lot of English speakers with Italian speakers, French speakers, and Spanish speakers, and everyone can log in with their own primary language. They can speak in whatever language. Whether if you're speaking in Spanish, those that are in English are set up for English, and it automatically translates and gives us subtitles underneath in English of what the Spanish speaker has said, or the same thing with the Italian speakers. And when the English speakers are speaking, the Italian and Spanish speakers are seeing a feed at the bottom of their screen in their home language of what's being said. And it's really helped a lot with a lot of different meetings and getting everything translated.
And then our last goal is to create, announce, launch a renewed and refreshed brand repositioning. In other words, are we for struggling marriages? Are we for marriages that need help? Right now, we seem to be kind of all over the place. We have, some communities on their websites that say, well, we're for struggling marriage. On the international website, we say we're a lifeline for marriage. So we need to get that part straight. What are we? And does the name Retrouvaille, how does that work for us? Is it meaningful? Can people pronounce it? Do they understand it? In our experience, we found that, even people that really want to remember, people that have gone through the program have a difficult time remembering or pronouncing the word Retrouvaille. In fact, Don and I were just at a regional meeting where we had speakers that were actually paid that came in. Every last one of them had trouble pronouncing Retrouvaille, even though they were paid to be there. And so, we're not saying to get rid of the name Retrouvaille, but maybe put our focus on either, help our marriage or, something else that's more memorable.
Okay.
And so, as I think we've mentioned before, we are transitioning to Viva Engage. The existing forum needs to be updated. We're not going to update it. It doesn't make sense to do it. And we have already made the decision we're going to transition to Viva Engage, and we've sent the announcement out. I think what we said was we were going to try to be fully transitioned by the end of March, which I guess is in a couple days away. We're not there yet. So we're going to at least extend the deadline to April 15th, maybe the end of April. But I will say this, that if you have not logged in or access Viva Engage if you already have a Help Our Marriage email address, or if you don't have a Help Our Marriage email address, now is the time to do it, because the existing forum is going away.
Yeah.
So we don't want anybody left out, and we are making that transition, and we're not going to run the two in parallel. Viva Engage is up and running. There's a lot of great content on there now. And so, if you haven't done that already, this is your encouragement. Hey, do it this week.
Yeah. Just go ahead and find that information and get it done. Send someone an email, ask, and they'll help you get set up. Now, for 2024 ICM, we are going ahead with a virtual meeting, as it had passed in a couple of years ago at the ICM, where every other year had to be virtual, so to help save money on travel expenses and everything. So 2024 is our first actual virtual ICM under that new model that came up a couple of years ago. And the theme for it is planting the seeds of love today to engage the world tomorrow. This is our logo for it. And you'll be hearing more and more about this as time comes by.
So here's kind of the dates and schedule and the 30,000 foot view for this, if you will. So the business meeting will be Saturday, September 14th at 2024. And then you'll notice the enrichment celebration, which would be kind of the traditional ICM, will be Saturday, September 21st and 22nd, 2024. And so you'll notice that we've actually separated the business and enrichment meetings for the first time. And our reason for doing this is we judge that the couples that really need the enrichment probably the most are those that are serving, that always end up, in the business meeting. They can't participate in the workshops. They can't really participate in the enrichment. So what we're trying to do is let's take care of the business, and then we'll have the enrichment part of the ICM a week later so that everybody can participate. The voting will be just the same. So typically at the close of the business meeting on September 14th, we'll have about 18 hours to vote. The only difference will be that we'll announce the results at the end of the enrichment celebration, which will be on September 22nd.
Yeah, and we're really looking forward to this, and we think that it'll help everyone get enriched and get to the enrichment and enjoy some feeding of their soul when our pots are empty from giving all year long, that we really feel like everyone needs to have a chance to get into some enrichment. So we're really excited about that.
We have been using the translation features of Zoom in our board meetings, and it's been working really well. And so we're going to have that at a minimum. We'll have the translation that is built in with Zoom. How that works is you set your native language, and then when someone's talking in something other than your language, Zoom automatically provides captions to you in your language, so you can read what the people are saying, whether or not you understand the language or not. We also are working on having live translation and different language streams. So we will truly have a global ICM with everyone available, ideally being able to participate in their native language.
Yeah. And we are encouraging you to celebrate with your local community. The pricing structure is going to be such that a community can pay for how many couples they want to attend and how many people that they think are going to be watching. And then that way you can get together and celebrate with, maybe watch the enrichment with your community at hand. We're there with you, and you can kind of get together and have a good time with a few of you, since we can't gather with all of us.
So I think that concludes our quarterly update. And so it's been our pleasure to speak with you this evening. And you can reach us at our email address, which is intlcoordinators@helpourmarriage.org. We would love to hear from you, and we appreciate the opportunity to serve.
Thank you so much for listening.